Hello, welcome to another episode of the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Heike, and today I'm welcoming Tom as my expert on today's episode. We are going to talk about Defender for Cloud as well as Defender for Defender Vulnerability Management. But before we get into the topic, Tom, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Heike, and thank you for having me today. As I said, my name is Tom, and I'm a product manager in the Defender for Cloud CXE team, especially focusing on the server protection piece, Defender for Servers, Plan 1, Plan 2, and the integrations with MDVM and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and all of that topic. So happy to be here today, and let's get it started.
Yes. And these integrations are super powerful. And of course, they also bring complexity with them. So when you think about the integration with Defender for Vulnerability Management, we introduced first vulnerability management in Defender for Cloud with Qualys. And I think over the time, Defender for Vulnerability Management, enriched their capabilities, added new enhancements, and so on. So now we basically deprecated it. Explain a little bit the journey of that integration and then what's coming now, or like what's here going forward.
Absolutely. So as you said, from a historic perspective, we actually had two different flavors of integrations when it came to vulnerability assessments. In Defender for Cloud, we have a foundational CSPM part, which used to be called as the free tier of, back then it was Azure Security Center. Now it's the product that is called Defender for Cloud. And in that, you could have an integration with Qualys or Rapid7 bring your own license, which means that it's like a solution that could be deployed and you could bring your own license in order to get a vulnerability assessment solution installed on Azure VMs. Mm-hmm. And with the server protection piece, the Defender for Servers plan, especially the Plan 2, we had a native integration with Qualys Vulnerability Assessment. That capability allowed us to deploy the Qualys agent into virtual machines, but also into machines running via Azure Arc. So that was a capability that was available for Azure VMs, for AWS EC2 instances, for GCP compute, but also for on-prem servers. Mm-hmm. Now, in the meantime, the Microsoft Defender XDR suite matured quite enough, and Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management is a very, very good vulnerability assessment solution that we have in-house. And so we made the decision to not only integrate with Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, but also to make it the leading VA solution in Defender for Cloud. Mm-hmm. That means that since March, we already have MDVM as the leading vulnerability assessment solution for the container security piece. And now in May, we deprecated the integration with Qualys VA for Defender for Servers and made Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management the only and the leading vulnerability assessment solution for the servers in our Defender for Cloud suite.
So, but you mentioned there was a bring your own license. Is this still possible though? So if someone has Qualys licenses and they want to continue using that, they can still do that?
Yeah, that's correct. So they can still use that, but there's one caveat with it, and that is that this solution is only available for virtual machines running on Azure. Now, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is a multi-cloud security solution, so we do offer, of course, the coverage for Azure, but also for AWS, GCP, and on-prem servers. Mm-hmm. And the bring your own license piece is not available for multi-cloud or for hybrid cloud environments, but only for Azure platform.
Thanks for explaining. So that means for existing customers, that might have used the Qualys integration. Now in May, it's being deprecated. So how are they now migrating to Defender Vulnerability Management? Is that seamless? Do they need to do something? Let's give them some guidance.
That's a very good question. So what we did in January already is when we announced that there is going to be the deprecation, we removed this dependency for new customers. That means that a customer in January 24 that already had been using Qualys VA on their subscriptions in Azure or in their multi-cloud estate, they could continue to use it for the subscriptions that already had the solution enabled. And now in May, we stopped this integration as well. So that means that they could, in theory, continue to use it on existing machines, but no longer deploy Qualys to new machines. At the same time, what we did is for customers that are using Defender for Servers Plan 2, and that had Microsoft Defender for Endpoint integration or the agentless scanning capability available, we already transitioned from Qualys to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management as their vulnerability assessment provider. So for them, in order to get vulnerability assessment results, they don't have to do anything else because we already did it for them. But what they now need to do is remove the Qualys extension from their virtual machines and from their Azure Arc resources.
Mm-hmm. So, and those that have it on their virtual machines and containers and so on, they still can continue to use it, or will it stop working?
No, so we did remove the underlying vulnerability assessment provider. So that means from a technical perspective, what we do in Defender for Cloud is we are creating security recommendations, and these particular security recommendations for vulnerability assessment findings, they will be powered by an underlying VA provider. This provider, when it was Qualys, was now changed seamlessly under the hood, like in the backend, to MDVM. So now we are just leveraging the MDVM findings, and the Qualys agent will still be there, but it will no longer provide its insight into the security recommendations in Defender for Cloud. So the best practice now would be to just remove the extension. If you remove the extension from an Azure Arc machine or from an Azure virtual machine, it will automatically uninstall the agent inside the operating system.
So Tom, still didn't get it completely. So we have Defender for Endpoint, but we also have Defender for Cloud P2, I think, which has, can you explain, like, before I ask the too complex question?
Sure. So yes, in Defender for Cloud, we have two different flavors of the server protection plans. It might be a little bit confusing because there is some MDE P1, P2, and we also use Plan 1 and Plan 2 as a naming for the plans that we have in Defender for Servers. But when we're talking about server protection with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, this mainly always means it is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint P2, the full-blown suite of Defender for Endpoint. And so in the two plans that we have in Defender for Cloud, we have Plan 1, which mainly is the one that offers the integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And as part of that integration, it also gives you access to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management as the VA provider. Also, the software inventory that we are showing in Defender for Cloud is powered by MDVM. So without using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, or mainly without using the integration with Defender for Endpoint, customers don't have access to the software inventory as we are showing it in Defender for Cloud. Interesting for customers is that as soon as you have an Azure VM, or if you're using a multi-cloud connector on AWS or GCP, or if you have an on-prem server with Azure Arc, we can automatically deploy Defender for Endpoint based on an extension to these machines. So it's like an automated onboarding process to make it easier for customers to leverage the capability. Then we have Plan 2, and Plan 2 mainly has all the sets of capabilities that Plan 1 offers, but additional capabilities. Plan 2 is what we always had as a server protection plan in Defender for Cloud. Even before that, when it was Azure Security Center, Defender for Servers Plan 2 was what used to be called Defender for Servers. Now, in addition to the integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as an agent, about 1.5 years back, we also started to offer an agentless platform. An agentless scanning for Azure VMs and for multi-cloud resources is a capability that allows us to scan machines for vulnerabilities, but in the meantime also for additional topics without requiring to deploy an agent.
Wow.
Imagine a solution where customers cannot deploy Defender for Endpoint. For example, in an air-gapped environment, imagine you have an Azure virtual network, and these machines are not allowed to communicate with the back end of Defender for Endpoint. In this case, you couldn't deploy the agent and you cannot benefit from it. Or imagine you have a solution where you cannot just deploy something into the operating system for regulatory purposes or for hardening purposes, whatever it is. In these scenarios, agentless scanning is a great capability.
Oh, let's talk about this. Explain a little bit how that works.
Absolutely. Let me talk about that a little bit. So from a technical perspective, what we do, and by the way, this is not unique to Azure. This is the same in AWS and GCP as well. So what we do is for every virtual machine in scope, we can create a disk snapshot, which is a platform-based disk snapshot. The benefit here is that the solution is completely transparent to workload owners, meaning it doesn't affect the performance of a virtual machine. So this disk snapshot is then being scanned by our own scanning platform. And it works in a way that we are mounting the snapshot to a machine and then scan it for vulnerabilities, for malware, but also for secrets. So when we look into the vulnerability piece, then that means that we are scanning this machine by MDVM, but we also scan it for malware with Microsoft Defender antivirus, and we can detect secrets that are stored on a virtual machine. And this is a very important aspect because it allows us not only to show that there is vulnerable software installed, but we can also find a secret that could be used to laterally move across an environment. Let me give you an example. We could detect that on a machine, there is an SSH private key that can be used to authenticate against another virtual machine that we have in scope. And this also allows us to show you if you have a multi-cloud attack path that would be possible. So for example, you have a virtual machine that is vulnerable, and the vulnerability is found by Defender Vulnerability Management. And at the same time, on this machine, we find a secret that can be used to access another virtual machine. Then we can show you that there is that dependency, and this is powered by the Agentless platform.
Wow, because I had a session and now that makes sense where this data is also coming from. There is that possible attack path, which doesn't mean it is an attack and there is nothing going on right now, but it's a possible attack path,
Right.
which you just explained, right? So you see all these entities and then of course, the big mind in the back end puts all of this together. Awesome. Thank you.
This is something that we can definitely show customers. And as you correctly said, this is not necessarily an attack that is happening at the moment, but it gives customers insight into what could happen in a particular way. And I do have an attack path that I brought with me just to explain how everything works together and what it means, what we can actually show in Defender for Cloud. Mm-hmm. So the attack path that we see here has a very long name, and it says Internet Exposed GCP Compute Instance with high severity vulnerabilities allows lateral movement to critical AWS RDS DB with sensitive data.
Whoa.
This is a lot of information in here, right?
But it's pretty clear, right? I mean, it's just a attack path 8756. So it explains Actually.
But still, it's a lot you actually need to process, right? You need to really understand what does Microsoft want to tell me here. And what we can see here is some interesting pieces. First of all, we see that this is a multi-cloud attack path, which means that there is a possible attack that could start in one cloud platform and it could end in another one. And at the same time, it really shows not only impact, but also the path that an attacker could go. Let's zoom in a little bit. What we see here is that there is a GCP compute instance, a virtual machine running on Google's cloud platform that is accessible from the internet. On this machine, we have found an SSH private key. And this SSH private key can be used to authenticate against an AWS EC2 instance. So a virtual machine in another cloud platform. But since we have Defender CSPM enabled, which is the Cloud Security Posture Management Enhanced Plan in Defender for Cloud, we can correlate that information. And since it is enabled not only on GCP, but also on AWS in this case, we know that there is a machine that is accessible via this SSH private key. And if we find that private key on a machine, we can bring that into context.
What does it mean? It says contains, can authenticate to, and then it goes further that I don't see anymore.
Yeah, on the left side, the attack path GCP, that is the name of that virtual machine, the GCP compute instance. This machine contains the SSH private key, which means that we found the private key on that machine. And this private key can be used to authenticate against the AWS EC2 instance.
Got it. Thank you.
And from there, we move further. If we continue to go to the right, then we see that this AWS EC2 instance contains an AWS RDS connection string. Again, something we were able to detect. And this connection string can be used to authenticate against the actual database. And this database, as the name said in the attack path, contains sensitive data. And it is flagged as a critical resource, which is that little crown symbol that we see on the database.
So, and because of the agentless scanning, these entities have been discovered plus their reach, or how can I think about this? Well, how is the, yeah?
So the entities have been discovered because of the multi-cloud connectors that we have, but it could also be just a resource on Azure, and this is automatically discovered as soon as you enable Defender for Cloud, because that is the foundational CSPM aspect, which means that security recommendations that we can create will automatically discover all the resources in scope on an AWS account, a GCP project, an Azure subscription. The agentless scanning now brought into context additional insights, and that is what we can see here. So agentless secret scanning detected the SSH private key and the AWS RDS connection string on these two virtual machines. And the agentless or agent-based scanning based on the Defender for Endpoint agent detected vulnerabilities on the attack path GCP compute instance. And this is where agentless scanning really comes into play as a powerful solution, because it really helps us to bring into context the resources with the different findings. And then in the backend of Defender for Cloud, we just correlate all that information. So we do not only say, hey, there's a virtual machine that has a vulnerability. There's a virtual machine which we have a secret detected on. There's another virtual machine we detected another secret on. But we just correlate all that information and bring it into context, and then can form these attack paths.
So now I have one more question, Tom, because I know Defender Vulnerability Management from its own portal, or also part of the Defender XDR portal. How does it look like in Defender for Cloud? So how do people see the vulnerabilities? And, you showed the keys, like all these findings plus assessment.
So in Defender for Cloud, we are using so-called security recommendations. And in these recommendations, the secret findings and the vulnerability assessment findings will show up as part of a particular recommendation. What we did recently is we changed the portal a little bit to also focus not only on a flat list of recommendations, but also to bring it into context with resource criticality and risk factors. And maybe I can show it to you in a brief live demo.
Yes, please. That would be great.
All right. So what we see here is Defender for Cloud portal. And in the recommendations view, we will see a list of all the security recommendations that have been created by the product based on a variety of so-called assessments in the backend. The first one we see here is called Machines Should Have Vulnerability Findings Resolved. And this one is powered by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. If we open it up, we will see that in this particular case, there is a resource called Contoso DSVM, which is a virtual machine, has vulnerability findings, and the findings are listed in here. So in the findings tab, we will see all the findings that have been created by MDVM. Now, these findings are associated with software and updates. So that means that if you're looking for a particular CVE ID, as you can do it in Defender XDR portal or the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management portal, you will go here, look for the actual weakness ID, the security recommendation that is associated with it, and you can click it. And then you will see the list of the associated CVE IDs. In this case, there are 2 of them that are associated with this particular security finding. And that one, as you can see here, is powered by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. In this case, this means that it is created by agent-based MDVM. If it would be agentless, it would say Agentless Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management security solution. And if we click this link, then we are redirected to the Defender XDR portal, and then we are back to the portal that you are already familiar with.
Okay.
So there is a tight integration here. We're not only integrating the backend and consume the data that we are getting from MDVM, we also let customers redirect directly to MDVM portal and then continue the investigation.
And what about the keys you showed me earlier, right? So there was agentless scanning and finding also credentials, keys. They're not part of those findings because they're not related to an update. It's not a machine.
Right.
Where can we see these?
It looks pretty similar. There is yet another security recommendation, and we can just search for it if we look for secrets. then there is a security recommendation. In this case, it is for one of the machines here.
Okay, but it's also in the recommendations. It will show in the context of how it is in Defender for Cloud, the different recommendations.
Correct. So here we have the same machine, Contoso DSVM, and this is the recommendation that says machines should have secrets findings resolved. And there, if we go to findings, we will not see vulnerabilities, but we will see detected secrets. What we have here is an unverified insecure SSH private key. We have an insecure AWS access key and an insecure Azure database connection string. Unverified means we were not able to detect a server this SSH private key can be used to authenticate against. If it would say just insecure like it does for the other two, we have found the corresponding resource. So we know that there is an Azure database this connection string can be used to authenticate against, and there is an AWS environment where we can use the access key to access it for.
Mm-hmm. So I think, Tom, I feel like it's getting a little easier. So before, I think there was also some automation to deploy agents, but now it's basically customers bring create a VM, bring a VM, they onboard to Defender for Cloud, and then they also have the option to get Defender for Endpoint capabilities on there. Is there anything going forward where we keep making it easier?
Indeed, there is. So I think what we did during the last about 12 months, maybe even more, we have been working on making it easier to leverage Defender for servers. There had been quite a lot going on, which was creating agentless scanning, for example, to make it accessible for customers that cannot deploy an agent, for example. But also with an outlook on the upcoming deprecation of the log analytics agent, which is scheduled for summer this year, we have been rethinking our whole strategy around Defender for servers. Back in the days when we created Azure Security Center as a product, and in the meantime, this product has been around for 8 years, and it has grown quite a bit. Back then, we needed to leverage Log Analytics Agent for a variety of capabilities, including threat detection, because back then, we could not use Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as an EDR sensor because it was yet not available for server operating systems. And during the time, the complexity grew because we had the integration with Defender for Endpoint, and we had a variety of capabilities for vulnerability assessments. We have security recommendations that still rely today on Log Analytics Agent, or that had been relying on Azure Monitor Agent or guest configuration. So there's quite a lot of complexity around the product. And what we did is we have been rebuilding the assessments. We have been rebuilding capabilities around Defender for servers so that in summer this year, the goal is that Defender for Endpoint is going to be the unique agent, the hero agent that we use for server protection. Mm-hmm. And everything that does not require an agent will be made available either as part of the agentless scanning platform that we have shown before, or as part of the cloud platform itself. So, for example, we do offer just-in-time VM access as part of Defender for Servers Plan 2, which is a platform-based capability that allows us to reduce the attack surface by blocking network access ports and just opening them whenever a customer that is authenticated and eligible to use the access to the machine can open these ports. So the idea is you can deploy agentless scanning, you can deploy Defender for Endpoint as an agent, and if you do both, you will be fully covered. And this makes it way easier for customers to leverage the Defender for Servers offering because they are not required to deploy yet another agent for a variety of capabilities anymore.
Yeah, and I think you explained it pretty well, right? I mean, products have been developed and this was here, the other product was already there, and different technologies and different solutions came together. And I think we are doing an amazing job right now to really simplifying it across. I mean, it was our own thing to bring it to where it is right now, but always it was. I think this is just a really big other step. And especially Defender for Cloud customers, Defender for Server customers, I'm sure they're quite happy that it's getting simplified. Do they need to do anything with this log analytics? It has been announced, I would assume. So is there some guidance for everyone what they need to do now?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the actual customer scenario. Customers that have been using the log analytics agent just for the sake of getting access to Defender for Service Plan 2 capabilities, they will be able to remove the agent as soon as we have made available all these capabilities as part of MDE integration or as part of Agentless scanning. This is planned by end of June this year. So as of then, customers should be able to leverage the new capabilities, and then they can remove the old log analytics agent. For customers that need to use that agent for log collection, Azure Monitor Agent is the successor of Log Analytics Agent, and these customers need to migrate. The Azure Monitor Agent team have published a migration guidance. You can deploy Azure Monitor Agent side by side with Log Analytics Agent, but they also have offered a tool to remove that old agent from their machines once customers have migrated. Log collection itself is not a scenario in Defender for Cloud. It's more a SIEM scenario, which is why we do not offer the integration anymore and why we also don't have our own guidance for it. But there is that guidance, especially for Sentinel customers or for other customers that are using Azure Monitor Agent just for log collection or performance collection.
Wow. I think this is a very complex topic, Tom, that you have there on your plate. It has a lot of angles, a lot of integrations, a lot of things going on. Right. Is there somewhere where people can find you? Are you on X, on LinkedIn? Are you sharing a blog or somewhere where people can find you?
Yeah, so in general, people can find me on LinkedIn, of course. We also are running the tech community blog around Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So whenever something Defender for Service related is being published, then we usually publish it there. And they can find me around the globe on at conferences. So every now and then we're also joining conferences and talking about this. I just were at a community conference in Germany in the last couple of days and had some great conversations with customers, especially on this topic, by the way, on the complexity, on the reduction of complexities. And I'm always happy to talk to people and also get their view, their perspectives, because that helps us to improve the product at the end of the day. And this is what we're here for.
Correct. So thank you very, very much, Tom, for being my expert on today's show, for bringing such an interesting topic with you. And I hope everyone out there enjoyed it as much as I did. And see you all soon. Bye.